Hi and welcome to Drummers Review. In today's episode we're going to be looking at tom tuning, and a bit similarly to when we did the snare tuning video, we're just going to be looking at how we tune the drums when we do our reviews of the various kits that we get through the door. It's not a definitive guide on tom tuning in general, it's just my particular way of doing things, and I find that it generates really consistent results and you can depend on this method. It's pretty quick to do once you know what you're doing too. So to start with, I'm going to be taking a look at this 10-inch tom. It's a Yamaha Recording Custom drum. It's our house kit that we use for a lot of the reviews. And essentially the way that I tune all toms is based around the same method. The way that I do it is I always tune the bottom head higher than the batter head, and I do it to a specific interval. I do it to a minor third, or 3 semitones if you like. And what I've found is that for each diameter of drum, there's a fairly narrow range of final pitches that seems to work well for each size of drum. For example, a 10-inch drum like the one I have here, I found with pretty much every drum I've ever tuned that's 10 inches diameter, it sounds really good when you tune it so that the final pitch is around a D. Now there is a specific method that you can use to ensure that the final pitch of the drum comes out at a certain tone, because as you know, if you've ever tried tuning a tom, the actual pitch that the tom gives when struck is not that closely related to the individual pitches of each head. So we'll get stuck into that in a second. First of all, I'll explain that I use a pitch pipe application on my phone to generate a pitch which I can then lock in on with my ear and tune the head to. Now, this drum has a fresh Evans Gennaro Reso head on it and a fresh G2 batter head on it. They've just been finger tightened basically, so they don't really have a pitch yet. Well, that one's got a touch of pitch, but they're basically flapping around. And to begin with, I'm going to start off with the resonant head. So I mentioned before that a 10-inch drum seems to tune really well to a D. I'm going to use my pitch pipe app here. And the little method that I have is, if you want to tune a drum to a D, that's my D there, you tune the resonant head a semitone flatter than that, it's a C sharp. So the resonant head is going to sound like... So let's see if we can make that happen. Now I find it's really important to get the head level in pitch at as low a point as possible, because if you start putting loads of turns onto the drum, it becomes really difficult if you've kind of started off with an unbalanced head. It'd be really difficult to straighten it all out and get an even pitch. So right now that head's sitting, it's very low in pitch, but at a relatively stable pitch. So from here I'm going to start to apply tension to the head. So right now the pitch of the drum is around about a D, which is about an octave too low. So I'm going to put loads more turns onto this drum. Similar to the tuning video that we did for the snare drums, I'm using this technique where I'll drop the pitch of each lug a little bit and then bring it back up slowly. And that's one of the best ways I've found of being able to differentiate the pitch of each specific lug while you're working on the drum, so you don't get too confused and chasing yourself to find the right pitch. So just a little bit further to go to our C sharp. That's pretty clean C sharp that we're getting out of the resonant head now. So it's time to turn the drum over and tune the batter head. Now, as I mentioned right at the beginning, I'm going to tune the batter head 3 semitones lower. So that's going to be an A sharp, which sounds like... Again, this is just finger tight, so I'm going to go through the same process, tune this up to my A sharp. Cool, so we've got about an A sharp coming out of that batter head now. We should find, if we tap this drum, now that I'm not muting the bottom head, we get a pitch which is pretty similar to a D. So again, a D would be, and this drum sounds like. Now, it's not absolutely perfect, there's still a tiny bit of wobble on the top head, but essentially that process that I go through of tuning the bottom head a minor third higher than the top head seems to always result in a really stable pitch, not too much pitch bend, gets a really nice full note out of the drum, and it also mics up really well because you're getting a little bit of extra movement off the batter head, which means that it generates a bit more low end for the microphone to hear. So in general, this tuning system seems to work really well in all situations. I even notice if you watch videos of Jeff Ochiltree, John Bonham's tech, going through how he tuned John Bonham's kit, you can see, if you listen to the pitches when he taps each side, it's about a minor third. I've seen Dave Weckl talking about exactly the same thing. It seems to be quite a popular way of tuning toms, though I haven't seen that many people talking about it in exactly these terms. So with this drum more or less in tune, I'm going to take a look at the floor tom, which I've already tuned up. I'll just demonstrate the two pitches of the two heads there. So here I've got the 16 by 16 inch floor tom, which accompanies the kit. As I mentioned, I've tuned it up earlier, and the pitch which I was going for here was a pitch of C, which for me is right on the lower end of what you can tune a 16 inch to comfortably. But I think with floor toms, it's generally nice to have them a little bit lower in their range so they're not too ringy and they have plenty of low end. So following the same logic, if I was going to tune the drum to a C, which would sound like, I would tune the resonant head a semitone lower than that, and then I would tune the batter head 3 semitones lower than that, so that would be the G sharp. So let's just have a little listen to the heads. First of all, the resonant head. It's got a little bit of wobble to it, but I'll sort that out later. That's, again, wobbling a little bit, but that's our batter head. So I'm going to go ahead and fine tune this later, but just for now, I'll show you what the resulting pitch is when I'm not muffling the other head. So. Hopefully that's coming across there. It's quite a low tone. So there's a few questions that probably come to mind. One would be, do we change this process depending on the depth of the drum or the construction of the drum? And the answer is not a huge amount. I've found through my experimentation that yes, different drums might resonate a little bit better, slightly different pitches, but it's within quite a close tolerance. And for me, for example, with that D for a 10-inch tom, maybe I might push it one semitone either way by shifting the pitch of the batter and resonant heads up one semitone together or down one semitone together. But I've never encountered a drum that doesn't sound good within that pretty tight range of tones. The other thing is different heads. Do they make a difference? Well, yes, they make a difference to the sound, but we keep the same approach, actually. It doesn't matter if it's coated, if it's single ply, if it's an ultra thick head or an ultra thin one. That same combination of the 3 semitone difference between the bottom and the top seems to always yield a really good result. And then I think the third point that I want to touch is, it's one thing to tune toms in isolation, but it's a whole other thing to tune them so that they sound good as a set. When you've got 2 toms like we have here today, you've got quite a lot of freedom there. But if you're tuning 4 toms, if you've got 10, 12, 14, 16, ideally you want to have an even step down in pitch through all of them. That can be a bit of a compromise sometimes, because the difference of 2 inches diameter between each drum sometimes isn't quite enough to accomplish the difference in pitch that you want. I typically like to hear fourths going through the toms, so each one is 1/4 lower than the other, and typically that 10, 12, 14, 16 arrangement is going to leave the 10 and the 14 feeling quite high in their range, and the 12 and the 16 feeling quite low in their range. But these are compromises that you have to make and decide on based on the kind of end result that you want. What we will do, however, is put together a little list of my preferred tuning notes, including some suggested pitches for different combinations of toms. You know, if you've got 13, 16, 10, 12, 14, etc. And you'll be able to use that as a reference point if you want to follow our tuning guide in the future. So now that we've gone through the process of tuning the toms, let's see how they sound in the hands of Nick. We really hope you've enjoyed watching this video on how we tune toms. If you've got any specific questions about our method, then by all means leave us comments on the video and we'll try and get back to you with any answers that we do have. We'd also love to know if you've got a system that works particularly well for you when you're tuning your toms, and we'll see you next time at Drummers Review.